And hello and welcome. My name is Kathy Van Maren, and I live in La Crosse, where I'm a member of La Crosse Area Transit Advocates. I'm also the current president of the board of Wisconsin Transit Riders Alliance, a coalition of individuals and local advocacy groups working together for better public transportation in our state. Today's program is the first part, the public program part of our annual membership meeting. The business part will be on Saturday, and I'll say a little more about that later. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do. If you want to put your name, where you're from, and if you want your email, that would be great. If you have questions for the speakers, please drop those in the chat as well, and we'll have time for questions after each speaker is done. And then I'm hoping that we'll send a follow-up email with a link to a recording of today's program. So today we're excited to host two speakers who will talk to us about public transit in Wisconsin challenges and opportunities. First, thanks and welcome to Patty Kiewes, Director of Green Bay Metro Transit. She'll talk about their experience with on-demand transit. And I'd like to ask WTRA board member Frank Ingram to provide a brief introduction, and then we'll hear from Patty. Remember, we'll do questions after her talk.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Ingram. I actually live just outside the area that's served by Green Bay Metro, and I've known Patty for, it's got to be 15 odd years as we've tried to get Green Bay Metro expanded. Patty has worked for Green Bay Metro since 2004, and I think it's fair to say that Green Bay Metro has been one of those metro systems which has adapted and changed itself in response to different demands being placed on it. I can recall that they've adjusted their route structure, and for instance, they've eliminated many of the routes that used to go around all the houses in favor of more direct and more frequent routes. Part of that process has now expanded into serving some areas using on-demand, and that is certainly an innovation that I've seen compared with a lot of systems. And I think that what Patty has to say about how it's working will be of interest to all of us. And with that, I'll hand over to Patty. I'll just add, I think she's been the director now for about 10 years. Patty will correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, I think you're right. I'm on my 11th year, Frank. So yep, you're right on. So thank you very much. So yes, I've known Frank for many years in my career here, working on various transportation options. So just thanks everybody for inviting me today. Always happy to share what we're doing in Green Bay. And so, as we know, the topic that we really wanted to talk about today is the on-demand service, and just provide a little bit of insight of how we ended up to here. So over the years, Green Bay has been a traditional spoke and hub type system, which is a very standard system, in transportation, especially in the state of Wisconsin. As we have over time had faced challenges with budgets and all of those things, it tends to, is a direct impact on service reductions when those come into play. And so what that ends up doing to our communities is, providing less frequent service and, not being able to hit all the core areas communities need. Which directly ends up coming down to, not very efficient and the most utilized services that the community is desiring. So with that, I think Wisconsin directors, do a phenomenal job with thinking outside of the box and trying to find different opportunities to continue providing great services with, less or status quo funding. So with that, Green Bay, obviously, just before the pandemic, we started looking at some ideas of kind of dial-a-ride zones, which is common in the industry. Just over the years with technology, it's really kind of developed into more of a microtransit option, which really brings in a lot of technology versus your traditional call and ask for a ride, which a lot of systems may compare that type of service similar to paratransit, which is, the transportation that we provide for the disabled. And so microtransit is similar in nature to that. However, it doesn't have the requirements of a disability and those things. But so, as we look at, some of the challenges with that systems have faced, particularly in Green Bay, as we've had to reduce frequency. As you reduce frequency in a system, you tend to see ridership decline as well. And it's kind of that downward spiral, because instead of 30-minute service, now you're an hour service. And if you're having to take an hour bus and you're connecting up to another bus that's an hour, you spend a lot of time on the bus each day. And so that ends up resulting in people not taking trips that they need to take, maybe choosing other options. And so that really kind of led me to exploring just kind of different things that are happening across the country and some options. And the dial-a-ride was something that was very, very interesting to me. And so I have spent quite a bit of time on figuring out how we could implement that here in Green Bay. At that same time, we had a lot of advances in technology in our industry, which really led me to the ability of doing the microtransit. And so what that microtransit is it really, here in Green Bay, we use that to kind of expand on our service hours and really helping with first and last mile trips. Really is how it began here. One of the challenges that Green Bay had, and I know a lot of other communities face it, we as transit directors will get a call saying, we just opened up a new business in this industrial park. I need a bus out here. Well, that's great. Can you give me one? Well, I potentially, but guess what happens? It's once an hour. It's not utilized very often because of the lack of frequency. And not to mention, sometimes it's just not feasible because fixed routes are all timed and we need to be able to make connections and transfers and all of those things. And so just the inability to keep expanding routes and stretching them further is a challenge in this industry. And so a lot of times we would find ourselves not being able to do those things because of time restraints, and more importantly, because of financial restraints. And so, and then of course, as we all, we approach 2020, which was a very different world for all of us as we hit the spring of 2020. At that point is when I decided to pilot some of the services that I was working on and see how that would work. So I will tell you that I really looked at it as a silver lining for us. It allowed us to really be able to try some things out and test some things during a time that I think we were all having to deal with so much change and more open to some of those changes. When we first implemented the microtransit, my goal at that point was really just to say, where do we need the services the most? And where does it make sense to have buses? Where does it make sense to utilize a microtransit vehicle? And so my ultimate goal and the goal of our commission is to be able to provide as much transportation as possible. However, we needed to stay within the same financial means, which is it's an unfortunate piece, but it is the reality piece that we needed to be able to do that. And so we really, myself along with our MPO, we really sat down with a blank map and said, okay, let's start looking at where people need to go. Where do we need to go? Where do we need to bring individuals? When do we need to bring them? And and look at how we could increase some fixed route frequency while still being able to provide some trips to some of the outlining communities. And that is really what brought us to down that path of where we ended up going with the microtransit, which is a service that we call GBM On Demand. And with that service, we really started with some zones. We piloted it for about a year, tweaked some of our rules through that course to see what made sense for us to actually come up with a final product in a final service. And I think that, the key important piece for all of this is our goal was really to be able to expand transportation opportunities. Green Bay Metro now sits with 3 modes of transportation. We have fixed route, we have the GBM On Demand, and then we have paratransit services. And so we want individuals to be utilizing the best mode of transportation for them. I will tell you that our on-demand service has been very beneficial for paratransit clients. As if those that are familiar with paratransit can be a costly trip. For individuals, if you're, here in Green Bay, it's $4 for a one-way trip. That can add up very quickly, depending where you're going. Our on-demand service is truly the only one of its kind in the state of Wisconsin. It totally intertwines with our fixed route system. It is meant to operate seamlessly. Our fares are the same. We have designed it to go for you to utilize fixed route and a microtransit. So for individuals that utilize paratransit, as an example, not all of their trips they may not be able to use on microtransit, but there may be some trips that they may be able to use a microtransit option. And they could use that elderly disabled pass or whatever fare that they use. And it's the same fare as it is on a fixed route bus. So here in Green Bay, you can purchase an adult bus pass for $41. And that's a full fare pass. And you can use that on our on-demand or our bus service for the 30 days. So, that was really our goal, was to have the 2 services between the microtransit and the fixed route complement each other, not to replace one or the other. They are meant to complement each other. And I will tell you that I have had so many people reach out to me and ask me, why isn't this system trying this, or whatever that may be. I will tell you that every system is different. Everybody needs to look at their own community and see how things work. I can explain all day long on how we do things in Green Bay and how well it has worked out for us, but microtransit is really meant to complement what we have. We have several routes now in Green Bay. If you go back and on our website, you can see a lot of our annual reports, and we used to have, a fair number of routes that would operate under system standards. And we do not have any routes today that operate under system standards. And because as we have redesigned, what we did is we really had taken that map and said, where are the large number of riders? And that is where we have fixed route focused. We have fixed route focused in those areas. It's 30-minute service in that whole core area. And then on the outside outlining areas, and I know that's similar in a lot of communities, the need for transportation isn't as high in some of those outlining areas, but there are still trips that need to be out there. We have businesses and manufacturing places that are on the outskirts, and third shift workers here in Green Bay. We would have never been able to fund fixed route system for third shift workers. Our service, ended much earlier than individuals having to go to work for 11 to 7 at night. And so microtransit has given us the ability to provide late night service. For individuals, we operate that till 11:30 at night. But so what we ended up doing is we have these various zones during the course of the day. So in these outlining areas where there's need for transportation, but not as high a volume, people can utilize that microtransit. Need to come to the core part of the city. We have 4 zones, 4 transfer points that individuals can go to these transfer points. buses are at these transfer points within, you know, every 30 minutes, and then they can maneuver, you know, into the core part of the city. That's truly how we've designed it. It has gone over very, very well. I believe we're approximately about 6,400 trips a month or so right now with microtransit. It has vastly grown. Our goal is that when you go and book your trip, which you can do via phone, or you can do it on an app, which is very similar to an Uber and Lyft situation. You can book it on app, you can book it by phone. And, you know, our goal is to have the response time within 30 minutes because that's what the frequency is on our fixed route buses. I will tell you, there are some peak times that individuals can get maybe a 45 minute wait. That is the downside of a successful program. You know, when we started out, people were getting response times within about 10 minutes because the demand has increased so greatly with that microtransit service. You know, we are seeing a lot more people utilizing it. We will be increasing some service hours this year to assist with that because we really want to keep, you know, those response times within a reasonable time. But it has gone over very, very well. You know, big change for the community, especially when you're going from a traditional public transit system and introducing in another mode. However, it has been very beneficial for, you know, from a driver perspective. You know, I think we all know the challenges we all faced with, you know, driver shortages and those types of things. So this type of service was able to assist us with that as well, having the combination of the different modes. But, you know, we're very happy with how it has gone for us. In addition, I think there is this type of service, I think, allows for easier expansion for public transit going forward. And I think the reason for that, you know, as people would come and request, whether it's from an older person or a contributing partner municipality on asking to expand fixed routes, it's a little bit of a challenge to be able to do that, as I previously mentioned. However, now with microtransit, you know, it's easier for us to expand those zones. And it doesn't always mean that it's coming with a cost. Excuse me. You know, if somebody is not, you know, utilizing the service, we don't pay. But, you know, as an example, if Frank needed to get a ride at 10 o'clock tonight and went on and booked that ride, well, then we would have, you know, a cost associated with that versus, you know, running, you know, 12, 15 buses on a fixed route system entirely. So it really has, you know, it gives us the ability to expand and add areas much easier than we could traditionally do with fixed routes. And so, you know, we kind of have a process in place where we will evaluate and review those things a couple of times a year on some, you know, expansion opportunities, or if we need to make some modifications. But, you know, as we look in how things have gone overall, I think Green Bay is really getting to be at a pretty standard level where we are at right now. Everything is functioning well. I think the community as a whole has adapted to it and has adjusted to it. And I think from here it's, you know, expanding. And one of my biggest questions now is, you know, when can we consider, you know, this type of service on a Sunday or whatever that may be. Sunday service is something that I think has been talked about in my 21 years here. Obviously, it's a huge financial commitment that the city and the contributing partners have not been able to fund over the years. However, you know, with introducing a service mode like microtransit, it is something that potentially could be looked at and explored and potentially easily added to the system, much easier than a traditional fixed route system. So, and there's various, you know, opportunities, you know, for on-demand services, and every community is different. And I know I have spoke to many various communities and board members, and they ask questions, and, you know, some communities can maybe have some form of it or a version of it. It's really unique. And I think everybody really needs to look at their own community and see, how, this could help complement the service that they have. And it's been great because it has really been able to provide increased frequency on our fixed route at the same time, which is phenomenal. So I don't have to have people taking our trips. So that's kind of, where we are with our on-demand, how I started, how I ended up, and where we are today, and potentially, where we could go in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions if you wanted to take them now, or I will let you all decide.
Thank you. Yes, if you have questions and want to drop them in the chat, great, do that. If you're on the phone or you can't do the chat, maybe unmute. We would like to keep the questions short so we have time for the answers. I guess I'll start while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to drop something in the chat. So it sounds like your current service is weekdays and Saturdays, but not Sundays. Is that true?
That is correct.
And is it half hour all the time?
So our fixed route buses operate during the week. We start at 5:15 in the morning and we go until 6:45 at night. At 6:45 at night until 11:30 p.m., the entire system goes to all microtransit. So during the day, when we have fixed routes operate, the way we are designed is, if you're in some of those outlining areas, it's kind of a combination of using micro and the fixed route. That's how we have designed it. We really have designed it as a feeder system to bring individuals in some of those outlining areas on micro to the fixed route, because we want to make sure people are utilizing fixed route. When there are large numbers, fixed route is definitely the way we want to be able to service when there is larger numbers. It doesn't become very efficient when those numbers are low, which is where we really want to be able to utilize microtransit. And then on Saturdays, we start at 7:45 in the morning until 1:45 in the afternoon with fixed route, and micro is a combination. But then after 1:45 until 7:30, we are 7:45, I'm sorry. We are completely microtransit. So, after the fixed route buses are done during the week and on Saturdays, you can maneuver our whole service area with microtransit.
Thank you. So
You're
did
welcome.
you remove any routes when you went to microtransit, or did you keep all of them and add the micro?
We actually reduced a few routes. So I believe we eliminated 4 routes roughly. And they were routes that were hourly routes out in outlining areas that ridership was, less than 20 a day. So we had, in one particular area, we had 32 hours of service in a day for less than 40 riders. But without a doubt, I mean, we still had 40 people that needed transportation. It's just uniquely, we were able to put that microtransit out in those areas. And so we really shrunk a lot of various areas, because in our city, a lot of the end of the line areas were not utilized quite as much, which is where we shrunk that fixed route. So that way we were able to increase frequency and then utilize microtransit to still cover in those other areas.
Thank you. I see Daniel has a question. How do the on-demand service zones interact with the fixed route areas? Can a rider take an on-demand service into a fixed route area? Sounds like yes.
Yes, and I think, we have we do limit that you cannot take on demand like into the core part of the city where we have the buses operating. And that is because again, where we have high volumes, we want to make sure that individuals are utilizing the fixed route buses. But in these zones, in each of these 4 zones, we have transfer points, and those buses meet up there. And the riders, as we all know, our riders tend to learn our systems, I think, better than majority of our staff sometimes, because, they are on these vehicles all the time. And I know Susan can relate to that, right? And so what happens is they'll be on a fixed route bus and they'll pull up their app and they'll book their ride, and they'll see an option in there of maybe a 10-minute option and a 20-minute option. Well, if they know they aren't going to be to their bus stop for 20 minutes, they'll select that 20-minute option. And so they tried to line those things up so when they get off the bus, their ride comes. And like I said, it's very similar with an Uber and a Lyft, so you can kind of see where your vehicle's at and if they're running down. So they do connect up very well.
Thank you. Frank has a question. Do you see a circumstance where on-demand will prove the need for a fixed route?
So I think that, I think a question that I get asked a lot is, at what point will on-demand need to be, an area of on-demand get switched over to a fixed route? And I think that it's not as straight of an answer as some would think, because, if I look at a particular area or time where the microtransit is very heavily used, just because I put a bus back there does not mean that ridership is going to continue like that. Because a lot of times with fixed route, it's not like I can run a bus, right? I need a whole system, because I don't know where you're coming and where you're going. Where with an on-demand, I can pick you up at 7 p.m. at Walmart and drop you off on the corner of Main and Monroe because you got to go back to your apartment. I might not need multiple buses for you to be able to make those type trips depending where you're going. So it's really not as straight of an answer. It is something that we do watch very closely on, where we see numbers and, when do we put in that fixed route. I have not seen anything that at this point for our service and our system that I would say, hey, let's put a bus back out there. I know Saturdays have been getting very crazy busy. We do see a very large demand from when the fixed route service ends and microtransit takes over. And one of the biggest reasons for that, and I will tell you that it makes sense, and it's our riders doing what is best for them, but we will have riders that will take the bus maybe to Walmart as an example and do their shopping, and they might take the last fixed route bus to Walmart. And then they're going to use microtransit to get home, because now they're getting that closer trip with all their groceries and all this. That is exactly what I would do, and that's what we want people to do. We want people to take advantage of these opportunities, and that makes sense, right? Who wants to try to walk 3 blocks or 6 blocks home with all of their bags? And so we do see a lot of that. I think no matter what times I switch, we're always going to have that type of experience. But it is something we do watch. And is there a time that we may need to do that? Maybe, but I think that we will need to be able to really monitor and see what those ramifications would actually do for the ridership.
Thank you. Mark has a question. How many microtransit vans typically operate when fixed route services finish up for the day?
Typically, at this point, I would say at that initial changeover when it's the busiest, it's not uncommon for it to be 8. We do have the capacity to go up to 12. And that is something that is, within Metro's control. We do monitor those hours on a very close basis, because obviously we don't want, we don't want to be wasting any budget dollars or anything of that nature. And so that amount of time that people tend to have to wait for a trip is truly controlled by us. This is a contracted service that we provide with the same contractor that provides our paratransit. But that is something that we do monitor very closely, that if we see that those ride times are getting too long, then we may say we need to increase some of our vehicle hours. It's not something that affects public facing to say that it's service hour changes, but we will add additional assets behind the scenes to help with those.
Thank you. Xavier says, during fixed route hours, is it normal for there to be just one microtransit vehicle operating in each microtransit zone?
No, actually, there can be several, and it really depends on where those trips are at and where they are going, because you can go from zone to zone. And some of our zones are on each side of the city, which it's not all that huge, but it still can take you 20 minutes to get from one to the other. So it truly depends. We contract currently with a company called VIA. That is who won our procurement back in 2020. For our paratransit service, and they have just been awarded the next 5-year contract for para and micro as well. They have their own software, and so they are really able to program and control a lot of those, that geofencing and those types of things that will allow us the best and most useful trips. But there can be several vehicles. And, and I think part of it is, their experience and algorithms and all of those things that will help show that, yep, we need to have a couple of vehicles today in this area. Certain times they may have to have 5 vehicles. It just truly depends. So.
Thank you. There's another question from Mark, and I would like to also add another question onto his. So he asks, has Green Bay Metro had to hire any additional employees with microtransit? And the question I'd like to add is, we've had some groups that were opposed to microtransit talk to our organization because, well, a lot of issues, but one of the major issues was the drivers. The drivers were not union drivers. So maybe you could just talk about Mark's question about hiring additional employees, and then the larger issue of, are the drivers union drivers? Is there an issue with that? Thank you.
So ever since the onset of ADA, which has been a very long time, Green Bay Metro has contracted their paratransit services. It has always been with an outside contractor. And, I think over the years, it's been looked at, from time to time on in-housing that, and it just, for various reasons, just was not the best, option, or a decision was not made in that manner for the city. And then as time, went on, challenges with employing CDL operators has been more, has been a challenge in general. And when I first went down the avenue of looking at this type of a service, it's completely different. It is not a CDL vehicle. And so, it's many times it can be the same vehicle as paratransit. Here in Green Bay, we intertwine our service for a more cost-effective solution. That has worked very, very well for us. If we don't have, if it may be a paratransit vehicle for this hour, but next hour it might be microtransit because there's not paratransit trips booked. And so it really provides us to utilize the same resources and same assets to provide 2 different modes of transportation. And so that has worked well for us. The employees for our on-demand service are VIA employees. They are not city employees. It is contracted. They are not unionized. And I do, I will tell you that when I first rolled out this service, there was some discussions internally in my own department on considering the fact of, is it something that we would consider to have this in-house? I will tell you that, the qualifications are different from a fixed route bus operator than they are for microtransit. It's not a CDL. It's, the skill set to be a fixed route bus operator is higher, which results in a higher scale of pay. That's typically how that works. I will tell you that an on-demand is very similar to paratransit, which I think paratransit has a unique skill set that is needed in itself that sometimes I think gets overlooked, but the skill set is different, and that is how pay typically comes into play and determined. And so given the fact of the challenges that we were facing with hiring drivers, whether that's at $27 an hour, which is what we currently are at this point, $27 an hour, we couldn't hire bus operators for $27 an hour. And so the concern and the challenge was, are we going to be able to hire operators at, I don't even know what that cost would, what that rate would be for a microtransit driver, because it's not a CDL, it's not a professional license. So it's a little bit different. So let's say it's $20, and I'm just throwing that number out there. When we face challenges with employing people at $27 an hour, how am I going to get employees to operate microtransit at 20? And so, what I tend to see with microtransit is you'll get a lot of individuals that at various times will work and not work. And, maybe they can work 3-4 hours today and maybe not work the rest of the week. There's a lot of those part-time positions and that people really, use to just kind of complement their income. That's what I see a lot in that industry. Or in that type of service, where with fixed route, we have labor contracts, completely different rules, and that, working a couple hours and then not for the rest of the week and those types of things isn't the most feasible and doesn't really work on a fixed route side for us. But so I do know from the microtransit, just to get back to Mark's answer, I want to guess somewhere between 15 and 20 various employees, sometimes even as high as 22, 23, I believe. And a lot of them are part-time. They work various hours, come and go, and works with them. We've been very successful on them being able to kind of make their own schedules and do what they needed to do. And so, again, they are their employees. We don't do any of that hiring. We just provide the oversight, of course, being the grantee of the dollars.
Thank you. I didn't mean to step on Mark's question. So he did ask if you, Green Bay Metro Transit, had to hire any additional employees. And it sounds like no, but
Correct. We, through, since 2019, in this industry, we have a lot of times what's called an extra board for fixed route. And since 2019, we have not been able to have employees on our extra board because of the staffing challenges with hiring operators.
yeah.
So we have been through a time, and I know this is very consistent with other agencies. There has been such a tremendous amount of overtime and forced overtime. It's been a challenge to maintain employees because employees are being asked to work 12, 16 hours a day or whatever that may be, because of a lack of the number of operators available and out there for us. And so that has been a challenge. I do know in my community that this service really helped us to still maintain providing services and good transportation services to our community without working our drivers 16 hours a day. I mean, we were forcing drivers to work hours to maybe transport 5 people over a 6-hour time period. That's tough.
Yeah.
And then employees I'm sure you can understand employees don't appreciate those situations. You know, they all have a passion for what we do and we appreciate that, but I totally understand that it's a challenge that they're trying to find a work-life balance as well.
Yeah.
And so when when we're having to force employees numerous hours and, having an extra 20, 25 hours of overtime a week is not uncommon in this industry. And that's a lot of hours for folks. And so when we implemented this, nobody, there were no driver reductions, anything like that. I would tell you, it came with a relief that our operators still were getting some forced work, because of staff shortages, but it was not to the level that they were getting. I will tell you, we have hired drivers. Our staffing is turned around much better in the last few months. So we hope to continue to see that. And I think as an industry, we're seeing a change right now. So, but I think that, it has not affected the staffing here within Metro, of our city employees.
Great. We just have a few more minutes, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat now. I was wondering, I've read quite a few articles about microtransit that say it's in the long run, it's not sustainable because it's super popular, of course, because it's, door to door or close to that. And then you get more demand and then you have to have more vehicles. And it sounds like you've kind of worked that out a little bit with keeping the fixed route and combining them as you are. But do you have any thoughts about when this might become unsustainable, or if you feel that's not an issue?
We have probably read some of the same articles. And so, I can foresee that. I can definitely see where some of that information comes from, because I think we all know that people would enjoy close to door service as much as possible. However, I have stressed this in every discussion that I've had right from the get-go, is I think that it is a combination of modes to help us to be successful. We would not ever be able to go to an all micro system. That would not be sustainable in any means. And and I share with people, because I've had questions and they're like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Is the bus gonna go away? It's not. An example here in Green Bay is our Route 6, which is our West Mason, very, very busy route for us. Not uncommon for us to average around 25 passengers per hour. I can't take care of that on a microtransit vehicle ever.
Yeah.
Microtransit, 6 people max. That is not going to happen. I have said always, fixed route is critical. It is important. It provides the majority of my transportation. It is what gets people back and forth to work. In microtransit in our community, I do not want to speak for everybody, but in our community, it is really used to help expand the options and provide additional transportation options. We can provide service now till 11:30 at night. We would have never been able to do that. I
Yeah.
used to have folks have to go to work 2-3 hours early for an 11 o'clock shift. Now, we all love our jobs, but I don't think none of us love it that much to go that early.
Yeah.
And so for now, people can call and book that ride. And, if an on-demand service hour is, and rates are different all over the place, but let's say it's $70 a service hour. Well, if I can get 3 trips paid for that, that is a whole lot cheaper than running an entire fixed route system for 3 hours.
Yep.
So I think there's a balance. We've been able to manage that. And in my opinion, in my professional opinion, I think that, that is really the key piece, is being able to manage utilizing your fixed route buses, because I'll tell you, if there are numbers there, that's where I want people, is on that bus. But definitely the mode of microtransit to complement and expand our opportunities, I think works very well together.
Well, thank you so much. This was really informative, and I think all of us can take this back to our own situations and communities and consider how this might work for us. So, thank you very much for taking
Absolutely.
time to speak with us today. And now I'd like to move on to our
Thank
second
you.
speaker and ask our secretary of WTRA and the founder or a founder of the organization, Susan DeVos, to introduce our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm honored to introduce our next speaker, Gary Goike. Gary was Oshkosh's state senator before becoming a registered lobbyist with the state. When lobbyist for what had been the major state association of transit agencies called WRTA, he opened things up in the interest of true public participation. That included the little-known factoid of helping WTRA get started, both in our navigating the application process for seed money and in speaking at our first annual meeting over a decade ago. So thank you and welcome, Gary Goike.
Well, good morning. What a distinguished group. And thank you, Patty, for your leadership. I've been to Washington, D.C. with Patty on her first voyage there. And of course, thank you, Susan, for the very kind words. You have inspired me for a long time with your persistence and even with your patience from time to time. So I appreciate that. And I know many of you on the call. I work with Pam Bush. I spent the last 2 days with Mark. I work with Jenny. Frank Ingram and I have talked. I've tried to pretend to have a British accent with him just to keep him on his toes. So I'm very familiar with this, and I'm really honored to be able to spend some time with you today. I have some really interesting things to share, some developments. So I do go back. I believe public transit is a civil right. I think that we are making progress. And I have learned one lesson this year, and things have changed. Do not be afraid to tell the legislators what you believe in. Do not be afraid. There is a change going on. And part of that change, and I'll use Patty's own area of Green Bay, right? So the people that have changed this were the people who were elected in November. People are aware, many of you are aware, you're pretty good observers. The candidates that ran this year were older. They had jobs. So for example, the new legislator from Sheboygan was the school superintendent and when he retired, then ran for the legislature. This is no ordinary freshman, right? This isn't 2 years out of college with a foreign policy. These are very different people who were elected. That has benefited us a great deal. In Patty's district, for example, an assistant district attorney won. The chief of staff for the mayor won. They have both, Jamie Wall is the new senator, who is a Rhodes Scholar, who has worked for the state before. So these are collectively a group that, number one, wants to get some things done. All of them, as I've added this up, is to say what you believe and to find a mechanism to get your voice in and not to give up on that as hard as it is. I'm going to start with RTAs, which was with this group an original issue. In the governor's budget, he has put in a vast new RTA, everybody included. So it's not just Chippewa Valley, or it's not just Appleton, it's not just Milwaukee, but everybody that has a chance of staying in. That has a chance of staying in some form. Why? because, and complete streets, which is another issue some of you are very involved in, that has a chance of staying in. Why? Because a couple Republican legislators who were local officials said, you know, Gary, I have to pull you aside and say, really, there's no problem with complete streets. It actually works in our community. I don't know why they would be opposed to complete streets. And in their caucuses, they are slowly changing things. There's an opportunity here if our voices are united and smart, and our voices are follow the same pathway. The governor's budget introduced on February 18th, and I think you're aware of this, but it's a bill number. So it's Senate Bill 45 and Assembly Bill 50. Those numbers will remain throughout the whole process. So if the Republicans eliminate part of the governor's budget, it will be talked about as a assembly substitute to the assembly bill, right? The bill numbers will remain the same, and the bill numbers are on the computer, right? They're on the legislative website. You will be able to follow all those things. So I work with Jenny and Pam, and I work with, we're registered WAM, the Wisconsin Association of Mobility Managers, which is it's a professional organization created by the state of Wisconsin so that there is coordination professionally and certification professionally of people who know what they're talking about helping to coordinate. So these individuals, some work for a fixed route bus system, some are employed by agencies, private and public, and they are a great resources to help in these messages and to work. So the governor has proposed, the legislature will dispose. This will take place in the months ahead. 2 days ago, Representative Tyler August, who's the majority leader, said there will be no state budget on July 1st unless Governor Evers agrees to all the tax cuts that we want to do, right? So it may be very interesting. Sometimes they threaten that, and then it kind of falls apart at the end of June, and they stay there till 3 in the morning, and everybody's under pressure to get it done. But we're going to watch that process. So one of the takeaways from this meeting is for you to figure out how you want to address that finance committee. It is very hard to sit through an 8-hour public meeting and then wait for your 2 minutes to get up, and they're all walking around and they're all eating Subway and they're all in the hallway talking to other people. I hope that you can find a visual way to impact the people that walk in or walk out of a joint finance committee meeting. There needs to be some physical presence there, some signs, something to catch their attention. AARP, which I think all of you know, used to convince the seniors, and they love getting up early, right? If you're over 65, oh, I'll get up at 3 o'clock. I'll drive to Madison, right? It's part of my normal day, at least for some. And they would all put on a red t-shirt and they would all sit in the front row, and they were the first to speak. They did this for year after year, Helen Marks Dix. And when their first presenter talked, everybody stood up who was in support of that one person speaking. Very impressive. We have to think of, I suggest you think of a way in which to get the transit riders, and you still have Chippewa Valley people, you still have La Crosse people, as I understand it. I spent a lot of time with the Milwaukee Transit Riders early on a number of years ago. You have people that could do these things. And so please think of that. Appear at the Joint Finance Committee. Do not be afraid to ask what you think is best in this budget. The governor has carefully put together the DOT budget. Craig Thompson, the distinguished secretary who became he began to realize every year that it is a Department of Transportation, not a Department of Highways. And that is a very, very interesting distinction. The governor, he did not retire. The governor shifted him out of DOT to an incredible position with the University of Wisconsin system. He is in charge of the governor's request for an additional $875 million to up and reboost the UW system. This is a very big deal. And he was finally appointed after 5 years. He finally received a vote of the state Senate. So otherwise he was acting secretary, which is just to make you nervous, you know. But he's an incredible person, and he was very supportive, more so of the governor finding a way to restore the huge cuts that Milwaukee and Madison faced in the last budget to their operating assistants, which were 50% cuts. Patty didn't get a 50% cut. Green Bay did not, but Milwaukee did and Madison did. And the governor backfilled those with ARPA funds at cleverly, carefully done. Governor does not want to return a single dollar of the ARPA monies that came to the state back to the federal government. And so there's still some time, there's still some pieces there. I would like to invite somebody from this group. Pam is on the call, and Jenny, and we'll invite you to the WHAM Legislative Day to give a presentation. The WHAM Legislative Day is on Tuesday, May 14th. The WHAM managers, we have a lot of fun when we do these. Patty is our president. Bobby is the president of our group from up in Menominee. And we visit offices and talk to people. We're a very diverse group, but we'd certainly like to extend an invite to somebody from this organization to appear. We're doing it in person in the Capitol, so we will have a space in the building where we go and we meet. I'm happy to say I am registered, Patty, to be at the WIPTA conference. I'll behave. I promise to not insert myself where I'm not needed. But I'm looking forward to that as well. All Aboard Wisconsin, which Mark who's on the call from Chippewa Falls. We had our legislative day on Tuesday, and the Bike Federation legislative day was yesterday. So I have been in 4,620 offices in the last few days. I know my way around, and it was an incredible experience. And there's one other takeaway I want you to realize that I learned this week. Within the Department of Transportation, there is a program on bicycles and pedestrian safety, and a transportation alternatives program. And there's also, we learned, a railroad safety for all the 4,000 railroad crossings in the state. And people in the Bike Federation feel like some of you would feel about trying to get across the roundabout, right? It's like they're all different. None of them are the same. I have no idea how many turns there are. Try to navigate it if you're visually impaired. You can't walk across one. It's very difficult. And one of the things I learned this year, and it's been verified, is that during the last budget, the majority party members in the Joint Finance Committee put very carefully caps on the WSDOT to apply for available federal funds. So in the case of the railroad crossings, the federal government provides a base of $3 million to help make a railroad crossing safer. Now that could be a pedestrian issue. It could be a whole bunch of issues. A lot of these are in cities, but there's some in small towns as well. And they added in under kind of a statutory reference that the department was prohibited from filing any grants for additional federal funding for this program. So they cut the program by saying, yeah, we're going to let you spend that, but we're not going to let you apply for anything because we don't have control over what you're applying for, basically. So I have to watch that, and that may be a small point in some of our individual contacts where Frank or Peter Lucas or any of you could make a point to a legislator that you know. A couple of other reactions. You have all been very good at promoting intercity bus. There is a growing concern in rural communities that they're isolated and stranded, and we have to push for that more. There are new bus services that come and go, and we need to take better analysis of what those do and why do they fail or why do they not succeed for a period, or why the company makes a decision to change it. There is a slight movement away from privatization within these legislators and saying, why doesn't the county do this? Why don't we have more coordinated paratransit and specialized services that actually are operated by a government agency? This is especially true in the area of non-emergency medical transportation, NEMT, which you're familiar, which is $110 million in a whole different silo in a different department. Secondly, or whatever number that is, the governor has put in a capital budget for the transit systems, for capital improvements. The federal government has disengaged in that, and there's a great need for capital replacement. This is an issue that Patty and the other managers are going to face. Where do you get the equipment? How do you keep up with technology unless you have some capital program? Also, a group like TDA has been terrific to work with this year. They have this Debbie Jackson as executive director, is available, consistently responds, tries to bring in their harbors and airports and other pieces to this, and harbors have become a bigger issue. Viking now wants to serve the Great Lakes, so with their longboats. And so the city of Milwaukee just approved $14 million to improve their harbor so cruise ships can dock there. I'm not going to tell the people that Lake Michigan is a little bit different than the Rhine River in case, there's storms and other things on Lake Michigan. But again, the budget allows you, that capital program would allow you to be involved. And so those are some basic points that I wanted to bring out. Our legislative day for passenger rail went very well. We also did a news conference, so we're on Wisconsin Eye. Wisconsin Eye, please, all of you, subscribe to it. It is free, all right? It used to be a make a donation type of a thing, but the legislature, and I am proud to tell you that through the Council of the Blind, we were the first check to help start Wisconsin Eye. A number of years ago, Virginia DeBlay from Madison delivered the check. First $1,000 came from the White Cane Fund. Why? Because it's access, right? It's electronic access. So that service used to be about 8,000 people, right? But now it's open. You can watch any program free live. And then if you set up an account for yourself, you can watch any archive program. So we had 5 speakers. We did a 1-hour news conference in the State Assembly parlor right outside the chamber to talk about passenger rail, and it got great reviews. 80,000 people now subscribe to that. And so the numbers have gone up substantially. So I encourage you, we don't know yet. The Republicans have not announced a day in which they're going to start dealing with the governor's budget. They will announce 4, maybe 5 I suspect 4 public hearings. None of them will be in Madison or Milwaukee, just so you're aware. They will be in Baldwin, Wisconsin, or Cuba City, or Osseo, or they'll be somewhere. But we need to be aware, and an effort has to be made to enlist. So if it's Chippewa Valley, then your folks up there need to be aware, figure out a way to make a consistent visual presentation at those meetings. So I know you have a limit on this call, I think, so I will be happy to take any questions. Good to see all of you, and I enjoyed the discussion with the challenges that Green Bay faces. All the system have challenges as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do have time for some questions, and I see there are, oh, maybe not.
Fire away.
Yeah.
And
Well,
my other point, Kathy, about the governor's budget, there are, and most of you have probably read the details. I didn't want to go the 4% and but the transit. The governor is recognizing the importance of Tier C in transit. So Tier A1 and Tier A2, they get a direct appropriation from the legislature. So Milwaukee and Madison will know precisely how much they're going to get in their appropriation. In Tier B, which are the other systems, they call them the Dirty Dozen, affectionately, are like Appleton, Beloit, Janesville, cities of that size that have fixer-up bus. They have to divide up their appropriation based on factors that the DOT does, and it works pretty well. Tier C has had the fastest growth in the state because it includes the shared ride systems. So the shared ride systems and the smaller transit systems are in Tier C, and the governor suggests a bigger increase in that tier, I believe justly so. And it is where the need is, where people are feeling more of the isolation. 2 hospitals closed in Eau Claire, right, in Chippewa Falls. There's no hospital there. And so off you go, right? And we have to really recognize the role that those rural communities, how much they are concerned about this. And we can speak to legislators about that. Transit riders are all over the state.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. We do have a question now. Could you talk a little bit more about the RTA for all that you said was included in the governor's budget? Daniel, the questioner, says typically an RTA has a designated geographic area where it collects taxes, fees, etc. How does RTA for all work? And
What a good question, Daniel. Dan, where are you from exactly?
you can unmute Daniel if you want.
Sorry, I'm in Milwaukee. I'm actually
Okay. I think I've talked to you before at one point, right? Or
Uh,
not? Maybe not.
perhaps. I've
Oh,
only
okay.
been in MCTS for about a year and a half.
Well, Adams is a
Evan
famous
is your
name.
son, right?
Yeah, okay, all right.
District I know him, so. Or in his former district.
Yeah. And most of you know this. Some of you know it so well, and it's been interesting to me. Evan was in the legislature the last 12 years and the finance committee, actually, and now he's city attorney. And he's jumped out of the frying pan into the fire with what he has to do in Milwaukee as city attorney. But this is all great. Thank you. So the governor is proposing that communities can join together to form RTAs. The legislature and the government at the state level would not impose a district. They would let local people put the districts together. So in the past, we identified the districts. Under this proposal, districts can be formed at the local level. It reverses it. It is an incredibly clever and a local government designed effort. So in Winnebago County, there's a big race for county executive, right? Because Gordon Hintz is running for that spot. And there was a big primary there, which Gordon did well in, but there's no assurance. But that became a subject in some of the campaign door-to-door type activities. And I do think that there are local leaders in communities that might want to regionalize however small or large that would be. I could think, for example, of Sheboygan. I could easily see Sheboygan Falls and Plymouth, with the growth that they have experienced, especially in the tourism and golf thing, wanting to do something more. Sheboygan County has the best bike trail. I mean, they have huge number of what they did, and it's paid off for them. And I think they're locally a little bit more open to that. So the district wouldn't be imposed by the state, but the governor gives local governments the authority to do that. It's not completely dead. Now, Mr. Voss will not support it, but he's not the only vote this time around.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Frank had a question. He says non-emergency medical transportation. I suspect that on-demand / paratransit could do this cheaper. How do we tap into this?
It is the issue that has vexed me the longest. 12 years now, when the program used to be run by each county. In each county, that person was basically a mobility manager. So in Kenosha County, the mobility manager sat with 4 Rolodexes on, in this case, his desk, right? And so they'd get a call. He'd find the best way to move the people around. So he had a whole toolbox of finding ways, but it was coordinated through a part-time position by the county board. And that person was responsible for coordinating that. Kenosha County had the best service in the state for that program. The contract for a broker then dissolved all the county's responsibilities. They're still in the statutes, but the broker contract superseded that. And it started out as a regional contract for those services, and then now it's statewide. It is not unusual for the dispatch center to get calls where they will say, well, we need a ride to Kakayu. And you finally tell them, well, it's pronounced Kakana, just so you're aware. And yeah, your ride is coming from Milwaukee to Kakana and then back to Milwaukee. Yeah, right. And so this is a real issue. I think the state of Wisconsin, this is my own opinion, has become more leery of that plan, but to replace it is a huge task. Senator Coles from Green Bay last year introduced a bill that allowed more flexibility and allowed the third leg on the stool under that system. It said that a non-emergency medical provider could also take grandma to get her prescription after her doctor's appointment. And that prescription could be at a Walmart, for example, or it could be at a Quick Trip, or I don't know, whatever the latest is, but it would allow another leg on that trip. Right now, some of that is prohibited. And so that's the concept of mobility management that I think we need to hear from the people in the field as to what works best. And it won't always be easy. These are, you get into the union issue. It is really difficult. But I think that there is in this new legislature, there is a belief that government could do better at these things and that privatization is not stable enough to hold service. That's the fear. And they all have different experiences in that. And the private companies want to really do well, but they're also not guaranteed that they have a contract after a couple of years, right? These contracts change. So Abby Vans or Mark Jones might not be providing taxi service in Baraboo, and that contract may go to somebody else now because locally they're not allowed to have those contracts run forever. You have to prove.
Thank you. Xavier asks, could you clarify the Joint Finance Committee's powers? I've read that it killed the RTAs about 10 years ago. How did that work? And will that be a problem for any RTAs moving forward?
Yes. So the state legislature and Governor Doyle signed an RTA proposal for 4 areas of the state. That was being implemented when Governor Walker got elected. Speaker Voss introduced a proposal that repealed that law. So it was adopted by the state of Wisconsin. Appointments were made to the RTA boards already, and then that was repealed by legislative action in the first year of the Walker administration. So it does affect it, but it hasn't gone away. What I'm telling you is the kinds of people who are there now are looking at it a little bit differently. There are regional airports. There are regional technical schools. There are regional cooperative educational service agencies. There are regional libraries. And they look at this now and they say, what is wrong with that? I mean, there's nothing. If I want to join, if I am Nina and I want to join with Menasha and Appleton, let me, you know, we can do this locally. Don't prohibit us from doing that. And then secondly, the other thing was that I was trying to bring out was I'm going to watch more carefully these provisions in the budget that could limit an agency for asking for more federal dollars, because that could affect things for us in many areas as well. I hope that helps answer it a little bit, but I wouldn't give up on it. I think there's more sentiment there.
Thank you. We still have time for a few more questions if people want to drop them in the chat. I'd like to ask, you had talked about getting together and interacting with our legislators. And I'm wondering how you would recommend that our local transit advocates or transit advocate groups work with our local legislators to amplify our voices at JFC and in the budget
Yeah.
process.
I'm sorry, I was thinking you were on a time limit, but now, you know, I had other points I was going to raise, more questions, give you an opportunity to ask more questions. Sorry, I didn't know you were going till 1, or maybe I didn't write it down right. So there are 37 new legislators. That number of changeover has not occurred in decades in Wisconsin, okay? So you are looking at 37 new people. In your area, how many of you know those new people, right? There have been changes in the district, so they're vastly different. Where Susan is now in the west side of, you know, the west side of Madison, all the districts changed their numbers and they all have different, and it's driving people crazy to figure out who is their legislator. And there are new districts. Sarah Kieski is a new senator in a very different district than Joan Ballwig had. And so get to know those. So when we visited offices yesterday, I absolutely insisted that when a bike person went in, number one, ask the legislator to be on their mailing list. The other observation I have, and just on that point, is that the legislators are taking their newsletters more seriously. They become a source of information and news because local newspapers don't cover everything anymore. And so your notice on when I pick up, I subscribe to a lot of them. When I open them, I find out where their office hours are going to be, what the issues were at the town hall, a picture of their meeting with the library. You know, you learn more. So please get to know these new people through their newsletters and sign up for them. Secondly, there are going to be new blue books. You need to memorize the new blue books because the districts are so different. And even after the election, I've had people say, oh my God, I went in and voted. I don't know any of the people. But that's an opportunity for all of you. They are listening. They are looking for constituent input. I received an email, and a couple of you who I talked to yesterday are aware of this. One legislator wrote back and said, Gary, you asked for a constituent to visit our office. We need their name, we need their email, and their personal address before we accept a meeting. And I flippantly said, well, how about their CCAP information? Would you like that too? I mean, this is really, are you going a little bit too far to verify by calling them back to see if that's the real person that's coming into your office? there's a control going on with some folks about who they see, but you have to be a constituent. You will get further ahead would be great. I guess that's the main point on that. Yeah, we had very good success yesterday. In fact, I think overall with the Bike Federation and with the groups that were there, Rails to Trails folks, um, many of our office conversations, and we went after the Republicans as well, had long conversations in the office and not just treating people. It's the new people that are really asking more questions. So it's an opportunity. We're all the same, right? You know each other, you've been around, but they have changed. The audience has changed, and we need to adapt to that audience. The other thing that happened, which is very interesting to me, many of these new people didn't hire staff from within. They brought the staff person from the district in. There's a big difference with that because the perspective in Appleton is, okay, I helped you get elected. I am a former council member or whatever, and I know the area. I'm going to serve that area. And so this allows you also to get in with these 30. I'd focus on the 37 new offices. That is where tomorrow is. And you're going to find them to be very receptive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Frank asks, I understand that counties can run transit. Are there places like Outagamie, for example, where the county could effectively become an RTA?
Yes. So within the shared ride system, and is Pam still on the call here? Pam Bush? I can't see her right now, but she may have had to go. Uh, a couple of years ago, the legislature allowed Walworth County to operate the shared ride system as a county. All right. Baraboo has a shared ride for Baraboo. So there is a provision in the law that would allow a county to establish and to be funded the money that it gets from DOT to run the system in terms of management, that there would be dollars there. So they have now combined, and theirs is very seasonal, I might add, Lake Geneva, Williams Bay. And so obviously there are more people there when it's nice out than in the middle of winter. But it's successful. So again, the local people are open to new ideas and new ways. They're scared that they're losing all transit services in any areas outside of metropolitan areas. Grandma's isolated, and grandma wants to live in the community, and she should be allowed to do that, right? Or at least we have to have a system, whether it's volunteer drivers, which there's another issue there that we're dealing with. We need to protect those people as well, very much so.
Yep. Could you, do you have any thoughts about the current federal situation, and how
Well,
that might
my
affect money
claim to
available?
fame, yeah. So I am a graduate of Lourdes Academy in Oshkosh, which is a Christian Brothers school, just for those of you that follow these things. So in Stevens Point, there was Pacelli. In Manitowoc, there was Roncalli. In Appleton, there was Xavier High School. Those schools were operated by a group of men who took vows but were not priests, they were educators. And there's a whole bunch of us who are Christian Brother boys that went to St. Mary's in Winona to college. Sean Duffy is the most distinguished alumni. He's much younger than I am, but I have had a chance to give him a hard time in his office because of that connection. We have talked internally, privately, maybe not maybe that needs to be done as ways to approach him, to say, you are from Wisconsin. You need to take care of your state. You need to give us the flexibility. You can't forget where your roots were. right? And you were a member of Congress, you were a district attorney for, he didn't like that. He was one that Ashland County, no, I'm done. I'm going to move to Wausau and I'll run for Congress. But yeah, we have connections there. We have to figure out how best to use them. And to bring him back here, you know, to know more.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're about at time and I don't see any new questions. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to impart?
Just don't be afraid to put forward and don't lose hope to move forward on this. Look at what you've done over the years already, and just think if you weren't here, nobody would be doing this, right? As a group, you have consistently given it your best, and it's hard. It's depressing at times. It's hard. You wonder, why don't people understand what we're really talking about? For passenger rail, we made a decision yesterday. We are going to put people on the Amtrak train. So 2 years ago,
Yay.
now this is so hilarious. I invited the 7 candidates that were running near Columbus, Wisconsin, Amtrak station. It's not a very, it is maybe
Yep.
locked. It's locked most of the time. But we had 7 candidates come. None of them had ever been on the passenger train that went through their districts. We got on the train and we went from Columbus to Wisconsin Dells. And the cost of the trip was like $8, right, for that trip. We
Yep.
go through Rio and we go through Portage. And one of the senators turns to me and said, "Oh my gosh, Gary, there isn't even a station in Portage. It's just a platform." And there were 2 Amish people. Their number one customers are the Amish in
Yep.
cash customers. And their whole world was like, wow, this is, and we got to the Dells, and in Wisconsin Dells, the historic preservation people got permission from Amtrak to rebuild the station historically. So it's like stones, it's like something you'd see in Door County. It's a small station, but it's a tourism thing. And we got off and we walked to the public library, and we had 45 people there to talk about Tommy Bartlett and crew. Tommy Deal woke up to the fact, I need that highway too.
Yep.
Maybe not as much as I need the interstate, but I need to be connected there. And he helped get the Borealis line established. So we need to make those
Wow.
connections, and we're in this together. But yes, yeah. And I certainly share with people about the Joint Finance Committee meetings. That's going to be the start of it. And I think we just really have to focus on getting to these new audiences of legislators, getting our views known.
Yep. Well, thank you very, very much.
are
This was
welcome.
incredible. And your encouragement to speak up and to connect with others and work together,
What it's all about.
yeah, is really important. And so I'd like to take the last couple of minutes to share my screen, if I can figure out how to do it. Because we would like to encourage people to come to our membership meeting on Saturday, March 8th from 11 to noon. That will also be online, and to join our group because, I think we're the only group that does what we do, which is just kind of elevate the voices of individuals in, small cities and rural areas and all over the state who want better public transportation. We help people learn what's going on around the state.
Yep.
If they want to try and start a local transit advocate group, we help them with that. And we just kind of share ideas and tactics and best practices. So please check us out, witransitriders.org.
Beautiful.
That's where you can get information about our coming membership meeting on Saturday and also learn how to become a member. And again, thank you to both of our speakers today. We will be sending out a recording as soon as I can figure out how to put that together. And yeah, I think that's it. So thanks again, everyone, and
Thank
we'll
you.
talk soon.
Great to see everybody on the call. Keep working hard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go forth and conquer.